Yeah, that's right, we got a bit of a 2-for-1 in this video, as these are kind of the post-Sonic battle Sonic stories that I want to cover real quick. First up, we'll be talking about Sonic Advance 3, and that's one thing that right off the bat is worth mentioning, is that while Sonic Advance 1 and 2 didn't really have that much of a story to them, Sonic Advance 3 has a little bit going on there. It's like a smidge of a story, definitely not nearly as much as like the console games or Sonic Battle, but there is something here worth talking about. So for the initial setup of the game, what's going on here is that Eggman has seemingly managed to collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds, and he activates a machine at the beginning of the story that, as described in the game's manual, splits the world up into multiple pieces, and this is a very vague and unclear thing exactly what that means, because recently it's been stated that each piece of the world was sent into its own little, like, pocket dimension, and that does kind of check out when you play through the game, because every time you finish a zone, you go through this, like, rainbow limbo nonsense world to transition from one zone to the other. So that could be like you traveling from one of these pocket dimensions to the next one, but it's not exactly clear. I mean, this kind of abstract visuals is pretty common just in the Sonic series in general, so I'm not exactly sure if we're supposed to take this as a literal thing or not. And in the original game's manual, it wasn't very explicit about whether or not this was, like, each piece getting sent to alternate dimensions, or if they were just getting broken up, kind of Sonic Unleashed style. The details are very vague here, but honestly, that doesn't even really matter because that's not what the actual story of the game is about. What the actual story of Sonic Advance 3 is about is the new robot character, Gemerald. And yeah, that's a pretty familiar sounding name, and just look at him. Definitely does remind you of a certain Gizoid, now doesn't it? And of course this is intentional. Gemerald was built by Eggman and is based off of Emerald's data. And Gemerald functions in this game kind of like Eggman's main enforcer. You're going to encounter him multiple times throughout the game fighting him, and he also assists Eggman throughout all of the boss fights of the game. And as you start to fight him, especially as you get onto the later fights, you see that he seems to start doing some similar things to what we've seen other characters do in the Sonic series. He jumps and dashes around in ball form, and eventually we even see him starting to teleport in a way that seems very reminiscent of Chaos Control. So to me, that's definitely meant to convey that Gemerald is definitely using some of Emerald's old data and ability to copy other people. However, of course, Gemerald, personality-wise, is just a mindless Eggman robot. That is, of course, only until you get to the final boss of the game, where after beating the second to final boss, Gemerald seems to be a bit damaged, and it seems like he starts to go a bit haywire here, and he steals the Chaos Emeralds from Sonic, and uses them to transform into some sort of monstrous state. And then, of course, Sonic uses the Chaos Emeralds to go super and defeat this rampaging Gemerald. One little detail here that I do like is the second to final boss takes place right at the altar of the Master Emerald. So clearly Eggman was after that for whatever reason. And that detail is actually a little bit relevant because after defeating Gemerald, Sonic returns to everyone and they celebrate his victory. Honestly, it's kind of weird because Sonic Advance 3 does have extremely little story, yet what's here, for whatever reason, is just so feel-good. It just makes you feel happy at the end of the game once you beat it. I think it's because it's kinda very reminiscent of the classic games, where there's not a whole lot here, but what's here is good, and it's handling the characters and the series correctly. And then everyone starts to head home. Except for Knuckles, of course, because he already is home doing his job. Nice to see a Sonic game actually handling Knuckles' character correctly again. But the story isn't quite over yet, because the damaged Gemerald is found lying on the beach by one Cream the Rabbit. Interesting choice to have Gemerald be found at the beach, a bit of a parallel to Emerald there. And she takes Gemerald to Tails to get him fixed up, and Tails manages to get Gemerald working again, but now he's not just a mindless Eggman robot. Tails seems to have reprogrammed him to now be friendly. And the game ends on a nice little shot of Cream and her mom having a picnic with the newly reformed Gemerald. Now, of course, with Gemerald, we have to ask the question about him being built based off of Emerald. is this newly reformed General just he's been turned into a good guy? Or is this meant to imply that Tails was able to restore Gemeral's AI back into Emerald? It's not at all clearly conveyed, and it's very up in the air about what exactly is going on here. You know, based off of Emerald's data, that could mean many different things. We don't exactly know if Gemeral is like a reproduction of Emerald's AI, or just his ability to copy people, or what. It doesn't state that Gemeral is, like, rebuilt from the pieces of Emerald, so it seems like a brand new robot that Eggman just based off of Emerald, but we don't know if he actually integrated the old Emerald AI into Gemeral. It's very unclear. Naturally, I would assume that this is supposed to be Emerald being restored, because otherwise, really, what's the point of Gemeral being a copy of Emerald? You could have just had this be a brand new, completely unique robot character that doesn't have anything to do with Emerald. And the game's final boss theme is a remix of Emerald's theme from Sonic Battles, so to me, that's meant to imply that, you know, this is kind of an encounter with Emerald, sort of, but again, it's very unclear. Though I actually really don't like the idea of this being Emerald being kind of revived, because this entirely undermines the whole point of Sonic Battle's story. The whole point there was for Emerald to die so we could feel the tragedy of his death. Like, the character was literally created to die, and then we just undo that death and completely irrelevantize his purpose, if this is supposed to be reviving him. Another thing I find a little bit weird about this is that Gemeral is associated here with Cream specifically, which is a little bit strange if this is supposed to be Emerald, because Emerald in Sonic Battle was closest to Sonic more than anyone. But interestingly, in Sonic X, they actually do have a story arc where Emerald shows up in the show, and in that story arc, Cream is actually the one who ends up forming the bond with Emerald, so I guess maybe this is supposed to allude to that, but that's even more weird because Sonic X is, like, entirely separate from the Sonic game canon and continuity. So I don't know what the fuck is supposed to be going on with this. And you know, even more problematic if this is supposed to be Emerald brought back, then it's like, okay, we built up this whole character in the previous game and then he died tragically, but then now this game is like, hey, he's back, we saved the day and we managed to bring our friend back. And then Gemeral never appears ever again for the rest of the Sonic series, so what was even the fucking point of this? Seriously, what is the deal with Sonic Team and introducing characters and events and then immediately acting like they never happened in the very next game? It's so weird. So that's it for Sonic Advance 3's story, and now we're going to shift over to talking about the story of Sonic Chronicles. But you may be a bit confused about that, because looking at the length of this video, there's definitely no way we could do a really in-depth deep dive into Sonic Chronicles' story like I've been doing with all the other games. And that's because I'm not going to be doing that for Sonic Chronicles, mainly because I just can't play Sonic Chronicles, bro. The game is so goddamn boring. I really tried to play it, but I just can't. I already am someone that doesn't like RPGs very much in general, and then Sonic Chronicles is a very blah RPG, and I just cannot stick with that. And there's no way I'm gonna watch an entire playthrough of the game just to get all the story details, because it's so long. So sorry to the people that were hoping that I would do in-depth videos on Sonic Chronicles, but it's just not happening. Still though, I do want to talk a little bit about the story of Sonic Chronicles, as there are things here that are pretty interesting and relevant to Sonic Battle. So I'm just gonna be skimming through things, giving you the super duper Cliff Notes version of the Sonic Chronicles story, because to be honest, I really don't care about it that much. So again, sorry for people that want something more in-depth here, but to be honest, it would be either this or nothing. So the basic deal with Sonic Chronicles is there is this new mysterious faction that has appeared called the Marauders, this group of characters in this fancy black armor that seems to have some sort of advanced technology, and they show up and steal the Chaos Emeralds as well as the Master Emerald. Obviously these folks are up to no good, so Sonic wants to put a stop to whatever they're doing. And of course he gets his whole posse involved, and naturally Knuckles is very prominent in this story as we're getting the Master Emerald in there. But not just that, because it is eventually revealed that these Marauder characters are echidnas, which definitely catches our characters off guard, as it was believed that Knuckles was the last remaining echidna, so who the hell are these people? And this is where Sonic Chronicles starts to get pretty interesting. So the deal with the Marauders is that they are actually an ancient civilization that lived thousands of years ago, and they were eventually trapped in an alternate dimension kind of like prison thing called the Twilight Cage, and time passes much more quickly there than it does in our dimension, thus why they're still around now. Now they have returned to the normal world and want to use the power of the Chaos Emeralds and the Master Emerald to escape from the Twilight Cage. I mean, yeah, there's a couple of Marauders that have already gotten out, but they want to get their entire civilization out of the Twilight Cage and back into the normal world. Which, just hearing that, it doesn't sound like these are particularly bad guys, but that is until you hear that the leader of the Marauders, Imperator Ix, also intends to try to take over the world once they escape from the Twilight Cage. And you know, that's not very cool, and Shade the Echidna happens to agree with that. Shade is kind of like the Marauder's second-in-command. She's been serving Ix her entire life, but she was only doing so because she believed that his goal was simply just to get the Marauders out of the Twilight Cage. Upon learning that he's actually evil, then she actually betrays the Marauders and joins the good guys to try to stop them. And Shade is a fairly interesting character to me. I mean, she's not really that complex, there's not really that much to her. You know, at first she's just kind of like the bad guy character that, you know, she doesn't seem like a bad person, but she's on the enemy faction. And then when she joins up with the good guys, then she doesn't really have that much going on. She basically kind of functions as like the exposition dump of like telling us what the Marauders have been up to, how the Twilight Cage works, how their operations are, what their plans are, all that. In terms of personality, she's very driven and focused and duty-bound, and she's kind of like a no-nonsense type character. And throughout the game, she and Knuckles actually start to build a little bit of a bond, which is kind of interesting, as, you know, for the longest time, Knuckles was alone as the final echidna, and now suddenly he's dealing with, oh, there's a whole bunch of echidnas still out there, and now he's connecting with this one echidna, and it starts to flesh some things out about Knuckles that are pretty interesting. In fact, toward the end of the game, Knuckles confronts Ix, and he actually tries to, like, tempt Knuckles into joining them with, like, come on, Knuckles, we're echidnas, we're your people, you can join us and you'll no longer be alone. And throughout the game, Knuckles starts to question whether or not it's a good idea to stop the Marauders, because if he does that, then he'll go back to being the last remaining echidna. But, of course, in this final moment, when it really comes down to the wire, he doesn't betray his friends. You know, he's got a duty as the guardian of the Master Emerald, after all. It's a small little thing, but I do like to see Knuckles' honor and his character getting tested like this. And from there, the ending is pretty much what you would expect. The good guys defeat the Marauders and leave them trapped in the Twilight Cage with no way of getting out. Of course, I am glossing over tons and tons and tons of stuff here, as this is an RPG with dozens of hours of shit going on. But to be honest, a lot of it isn't super important. A lot of it is just stuff to justify RPG things for the player to do. You know, go around here to get the things, help out these people so you can get the way forward. You know, there's a lot of busy work that you do that doesn't really push the plot forward very much. Obviously, there's a lot of character interaction stuff that I didn't really go into, but I kind of don't really care that much. Sonic Chronicles isn't even canon to the main series anyway, not that that really means much of anything considering how canon works in the Sonic series. You could easily just fucking throw Shade into any Sonic game and it would be no more questionable than a bunch of the other shit that they've done. Of course, we're never actually going to see Shade again because of reasons, which I do find unfortunate because I think there is a lot of potential in Shade as a character, especially at this point because, you know, her whole life has been serving the Marauders and now she no longer has anyone to serve. So you could do interesting things with her character of her being lost and not knowing what to do with her life now. And you know what, if you really want to have Knuckles going on adventures and you want to settle the whole, Knuckles, aren't you supposed to be guarding the Master Emerald thing, just an idea I'm throwing out here, you could have had Shade take over as Guardian of the Master Emerald anytime Knuckles is away. That would make sense, considering throughout the story, Shade and Knuckles start to build up a bit of an attachment, so maybe with nowhere left to go in her life, she decides to join Knuckles and help him guard the Master Emerald. This especially could work because one day the Marauders might find another way to return, and they might come after the Master Emerald again, and Shade wants to make sure that doesn't happen. Just an idea that I think would be cool. Like I said, I think Shade has a lot of potential as a character. But more interesting than the actual story of Sonic Chronicles to me is a bit of the backstory and how it expands upon existing elements of the Sonic universe. Because, as I said, the Marauders were an ancient civilization that existed long ago, and of course they are echidnas, but they are not the same echidna civilization that Knuckles is from. However, they did live at the same time, and in fact, these two civilizations were in conflict with each other. It was the Knuckles clan versus the Nocturnus clan, which is the actual name of the Marauders. However, the Nocturnus clan had super advanced technology, whereas Knuckles' clan was much more primitive. When the leader of Knuckles' tribe wanted to use the Chaos Emeralds for conquest, it kind of gets reframed into him needing the Chaos Emeralds and needing the power of them in order to confront this far more technologically advanced civilization that they were probably losing the war with. This would actually kind of help to make the leader of Knuckles' clan a slightly more sympathetic character, where perhaps he was in a desperate situation where he thought the only way his clan would survive is if they used the Chaos Emeralds to defeat the Nocturnus clan, which would mean that, he saw what he was doing as a necessary evil, and that kind of pulls back on the character being a giant dick a little bit. Although that kind of does undermine the theme of SA1, but I think it actually still kind of works for the most part. And that's kind of cool, expanding upon some of that old history there. But Sonic Chronicles goes one step further, because as an ancient civilization with advanced technology, it turns out that the Nocturnus clan are the ones that invented the Gizoids. There are multiple Gizoids that you fight toward the end of the game. And that kind of makes this whole thing even cooler, that we're connecting multiple pieces of lore from different parts of the Sonic series in a way that kind of actually makes sense. I mean, there's a little bit of inconsistency here, because in Sonic Battle, it's stated that Emerald destroyed the ancient civilization, but in Sonic Chronicles, it's stated that some weird fucking eldritch space monster called Argus grabbed the Nocturnus civilization and just pulled it into the Twilight Cage. For no really understood reason. It's theorized that it's maybe because their civilization got too advanced or something like that, but we don't exactly know why. I guess you could just say that this was a legend that wasn't exactly accurate to the facts. People didn't know what happened long ago, and so they thought that Emerald destroyed the ancient civilization. But clearly in Sonic Battle that was supposed to be the intention, so that would make this a bit of a retcon, but it's one that I actually don't think is that bad. And this game in particular really suffers from the fact that Gemerald no longer exists after Sonic Advance 3, because imagine if we had Shade and Gemerald, you could have had a really interesting conversation there of how it was a recreation of a Gizoid and how it was the most powerful Gizoid ever created, or whatever. There could have been really cool potential there. Not to mention the fact that if Gemerald is supposed to be the revival of Emerald, then he could have learned about the civilization that he originated from. Lots of missed opportunities there, which is really weird because, Sonic Chronicles references so many other things in the Sonic series, you'd think that they'd be up and up on the fact that Gemerald exists. I don't know, maybe this game takes place before Sonic Advance 3, who knows? Though again, Sonic Chronicles is not actually canon to the Sonic series, though quite frankly, I don't really give a shit. The canon of Sonic is such a fucking disaster at this point that I say fuck it, who cares? There is cool stuff here that I think adds and enhances the lore of the Sonic series, that dismissing it as non-canon would be a stupid thing to do. So as far as I'm concerned, then this is totally the explanation for these things. The Gizoids were created by the Nocturnus clan, and they were in conflict with the Echidnas, because it just kind of works, and it doesn't really harm anything. Honestly, even though I don't give a shit about the game itself, I would have been interested to see a Sonic Chronicles 2, where they could have expanded upon things even further and explored new things with Shade and other stuff like that. It could have been pretty interesting. One thing I do find interesting about Sonic Chronicles is that it is a game made by BioWare, and you can definitely tell that. The fact that it actually dives into older pieces of Sonic lore and tries to connect these things, it's like it's written by people that actually know how to tell stories and do world building or something. And then towards the later part of the game, it starts to get very Mass Effect, where you get a spaceship and you're going to different places and you're helping out different races to get them to join you to defeat the ultimate bad guys. And most interestingly, Sonic Chronicles also incorporates some elements from outside the Sonic games and takes things from other pieces of Sonic media. For example, SWAT bots from Sonic SatAM show up in this game as an enemy type. Interesting to see something like that, as the Japanese and game side of Sonic has pretty much always completely ignored the external media. And of course, there are a number of things about Sonic Chronicles that are inspired by stuff that happened in the Archie comics, which of course is the reason why Sonic Chronicles was shot into oblivion, because I'm guessing foolish BioWare assumed that Sega owned everything Sonic-related because they assumed that Sega was a company that had their shit together, but as history has shown us, that is not the case. And that's all I have to say about the story of Sonic Advance 3 and Sonic Chronicles. A quick little video here just to kind of work as the epilogue to Sonic Battle. I don't necessarily think Sonic Battle needed an epilogue, but it got one, and at the very least, it added some cool potential lore stuff to the Sonic universe, so I'll take it for that at least. Thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.